2021. It's really nice to be with all of you, even though we are virtual today. As most of you know, we held these programs regularly in 2020. Matter of fact, we had 10 sessions throughout the year on different relevant community topics. We welcome your suggestions for future programs and hope you take the time to complete the survey at the end of this program today. I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items. Many of you know this and are probably Zoom experts by now. If you have any issues with our technology, please put it in the chat box. And then in the Q&A box, please put your questions. And the way that our agenda is supposed to unfold, we'll have about 10 minutes at the end of the program. We thought it was appropriate today to start with a compelling issue in our community: basic needs, food, and shelter. Christina will first provide a quick update on our COVID fund grant making in relation to basic needs, and then turn the program over to Joanne Goldblum. So Christina, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christina Ciociola, Senior Vice President for Grant Making and Strategy at the Foundation. We wanted to take this opportunity to give you all a brief update on the Greater New Haven COVID-19 Community Fund, which, thanks to the generosity of many of the people who are joining us this afternoon, in 2020 with United Way, we raised over $3 million and distributed $3 million. Most of that was distributed between April and June of 2020 in response to the pandemic. Basic needs and health, not surprisingly, comprised most of the grants that were awarded. And additionally, the Community Foundation's grant making for basic needs in 2020 increased by nearly 80%, and our grant making to health-related causes increased by nearly 30% in direct response to the pandemic. In 2020, a Basic Needs Fund was also established at the foundation and is being supported by an active group of donors who are also working on an effort to raise awareness around the importance of supporting basic needs. So in 2021, so far this year, through our COVID-19 Community Fund, we just awarded over $880,000 in grants. That was after we received over $2.6 million worth of requests. Now, we have planned out 3 rounds of grant making from the COVID-19 fund through the spring. This was just the first round, and the demand was $2.6 million, and we distributed, as I said, a little over $880,000. So we have right now about $350,000 left to spread across the next 2 rounds of grant making. And as we could see from the first round, the demand still persists, and it persists pretty significantly. And basic needs obviously continues to dominate the landscape. I would also add that overall, the foundation's grant making in 2021 is also prioritizing the immediate and ongoing impact of COVID-19 through all of our grant making, not just through the COVID Community Fund. And in addition, we're also prioritizing issues around racial equity through our grant making as well, and the supplemental resources we are raising as part of our Stepping Forward initiative. So just a quick overview of some of the things supported through the COVID-19 Community Fund. Food insecurity loomed large, and it continues to loom large in terms of basic needs. We did a lot of grants that provided direct cash assistance, also housing and shelter, whether it was transitioning the homeless population into hotels or providing rental assistance or legal assistance around housing issues. Lots of grants to support PPE and issues of community safety. The issues of healthcare access, particularly helping organizations transition to telemed services, whether it was for regular health or mental health, physical health or mental health needs. and helping the nonprofits adapt their programming and their business to operate in the pandemic and to stay open for the ones who were able to stay open. So with our partners at United Way, we learned a lot of lessons. I'll just share three lessons. Carmen, you can move to the next slide. Thank you. So one thing we learned is that direct financial assistance had significant impact on people's ability to support their immediate needs as it related to the pandemic. In the traditional course of business, we would consider these risky grants, giving a grant to an organization for them to then distribute it in the form of cash or gift cards. But we did a lot of that, and it was extremely impactful, and it really gave people the independence and autonomy to decide themselves what was the most pressing need at the time, whether it was food, shelter, rental assistance, or medicine. We also learned that grassroots organizations were really instrumental in reaching deep into the community to those individuals who would be less likely to access services otherwise. We actually learned about a lot of new organizations and a lot of community change makers that we did not know about before. So that is certainly helpful to our work as we continue to move on. The kinds of groups that I'm talking about are church groups, mutual aid groups, and others, as I said. So while planning for the lasting impact of COVID-19, I think it's important that there still will be significant demand for immediate need, particularly in the areas of basic needs, in the areas of food, housing, and education. I mean, we just saw that in our recent round of grant making. As I said, we received requests for over $2.6 million, and we distributed about $880,000 in response to that. So that's a really quick overview of where we are with the COVID Relief Fund and the Foundation's response.
The panel members can turn on their videos.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I had a technical problem. So I will transition to our distinguished panel and moderator. We have Joanne Goldblum, who is author and CEO of the National Diaper Bank. And we are joined by panelist Jill Meyerhoff, who is the Executive Director of FISH, and Myra Smith, who is a neighborhood services advocate and does some work for Christian Community Action. So with that, Joanne, I will pass it off to you. Thank you.
All right, now you can hear me. Thank you so much, Christina and Dottie, and to the whole Community Foundation for hosting this really important conversation. I'm so happy to be here with Jill and Myra to talk about basic needs in the New Haven community and what it is that some of the providers who work on basic needs in our community are seeing and doing. I was asked to talk a little bit to frame the issue of basic needs that we'll be talking about. And as Christina mentioned, I recently co-authored a book called Broken America: Seeing, Understanding, and Ending U.S. Poverty. And I wrote this book with my friend and colleague, Colleen Shaddix. And I'm going to read a short bit of the introduction as a way to frame our conversation. In early 2020, poverty in the United States was exposed in a way it never had been before. When a global pandemic led local and national governments to close businesses and issue stay-at-home orders, unemployment swelled to levels not seen since the Great Depression. Businesses failed. For managerial and professional workers who could work remotely, paychecks were more likely to keep coming in the pandemic. Meanwhile, in April of 2020, the US lost 7.65 million leisure and hospitality jobs, 2.1 million retail jobs, and 1.3 million manufacturing jobs. Workers newly branded as essential continued to labor in grocery stores and nursing homes, where they risked their lives for wages that never did pay their bills. Millions of people experienced financial hardship, but COVID-19, of course, did not create US poverty. It merely brought it into the light. The economic pain of the pandemic was much like the virus itself, much more threatening to people with underlying vulnerabilities. Even before the novel coronavirus struck, most people in this country had less than $1,000 in savings. In the middle of a strong economy, workers were existing paycheck to paycheck because income growth has lagged behind the cost of living for decades, while corporate profits and CEO pay soared. Just as the US should have done more to prepare a public health infrastructure to confront a pandemic, it should have done much more to ensure financial resiliency among its population. The current economic suffering is by no means inevitable, and neither is the suffering that has plagued lower income US Americans for decades. Our contention is that poverty can be eradicated in this country. It persists in part because of horrible misconceptions about people in poverty. A common saying, accepted as wisdom, available on posters, t-shirts meant to be inspirational, reveals a tragic misunderstanding about poverty and its causes. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Anti-poverty efforts should stop making assumptions about people's fishing abilities. Maybe the river's fished out. Maybe that man is too weak with hunger to pick up a pole. Maybe it's past time to stop judging and give that hungry person a fish. Historically, the United States has approached poverty as a lack of knowledge, or perhaps a lack of character and ambition, when in fact we'll show it's a lack of resources. We hope you'll adopt that definition as you travel with us across the country, from a dying town where the water coming out of the tap is so dirty it looks like chocolate milk, to Los Angeles's Skid Row. Nearly all the research in this book was done before the pandemic. The stories you will read have nothing to do with extraordinary times. Poverty is quite ordinary in the United States. When you focus on basic needs, water, food, housing, energy, transportation, hygiene, and health, and learn about the significant barriers that many US Americans face in obtaining them, you cannot help but realize that poverty is close to inevitable for low-wage workers and their children. Solutions fall short because they often try to fix people in poverty rather than eliminate poverty itself. They don't need to change. The world does. When people don't have the necessities of life, poverty becomes a kind of quicksand. That is some of the introduction to our book, Broken America. And I wanted to read it as an introduction to the conversation that Jill and Myra and I will have, to set the stage for the conversation about what we can do, what we are doing, and what we should do. I'm hopeful that we can talk in this conversation both about the amazing work you both do and the organizations you do this work with, and also about any recent public policy wins that have happened that are changing potentially our outlook and focus on children and families who experience economic hardship. So I'll start by saying, welcome, Jill and Myra. It's so nice to be here with you both.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I thought we'd just start by giving you each a minute or two to talk about your work and to talk about your organizations. Myra, if you want to start and talk about the work you do and the work that CCA does in the community, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Myra Smith, and I am the Neighborhood Services Advocate for Christian Community Action. Christian Community Action is a nonprofit agency, and we are located in the Hill section of New Haven, Connecticut. So we have many services at this location, and we also have other locations throughout the city of New Haven. At our location here, we have the Hillside Shelter, where we house families. Now, that's one of the hardest things to find nowadays with shelters, is to be able to keep families together as a unit. So we are one of the rare agencies that have shelters, meaning the mom, the father, and the children are housed together in an apartment styled shelter where they are given services. They're assigned a caseworker, and 9 out of 10 of them do leave here with some form of housing. We also have the Arise Center, which is right next door. And there we have employment services. We have activities for the families. We have a clothing closet for people who are seeking jobs and need professional clothing. And it's basically sort of like a community center, depending on the time of year or the events that are going on. Here in the office, I am in charge of the food pantry. I am also in charge of the diaper bank, and I also do the utility programs, which is energy assistance for people who need assistance with their gas or electric bills. And I also do the Operation Fuel program, which is for the secondary utility, which for the most part usually is for people who need electricity, help with their electricity. And I'll go back, energy assistance is also for people who need to heat their home with oil as well. Excuse me. And we also have what used to be called the Transitional Program on Winchester Avenue. That program has recently just been remodeled, and it is reopening. We are hoping that it will be reopening the end of May, the end of April, beginning of May. It will still be sort of like a transitional program, but there will just be a partnership with, I believe, with the Housing Authority. And this way, people will be able to stay there for a set amount of time. They will be able to receive services as far as counseling, far as helping with budgeting, help with looking for jobs. And the main goal is to make sure that people are leaving and becoming stable. And Christian Community Action has been around for many, many, many years. I want to say most likely from the 60s, I believe, which is way before my time, but they have been in the community for a very long time. They have serviced the city of New Haven, and even with our programs, we extend beyond New Haven. Because of the pandemic, we opened up our food pantry because usually the food pantry is limited to Hill residents, but we allowed it to be for anyone who knocked on our door. So Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 p.m., people were knocking on our door all day, and all they had to do was give me their name and they received a bag of food. Usually we serve about maybe 30 to 40 people a month, depending on our regulars. For the year, last year, we served over 1,000 families with emergency bags. That's unheard of. We do emergency bags usually once a week, and we may get a few people. But last year, we had more than a few people. So it is definitely obvious that the need is there. Even with them adding more benefits, people still just don't have enough. Many people lost their jobs. So people are basically looking for any type of assistance and a safety net and Christian community action. We have been there every step of the way. We have not closed our doors. We do not plan on closing our doors. And we are expanding again, as I said, with the new
Great.
program coming to Winchester Avenue.
Great.
And thank God for the donations of the community,
Mhm.
because we have been able to stay afloat and we have lacked nothing, and God has provided. And so far, everyone that has sought help, we've been able to help them in some way, shape, or form.
Great. Thank you, Myra. That is really, I really appreciate that. That you guys are doing a lot of amazing work. I do have one follow-up question before I go over to you, Jill, and that is, can you describe, you mentioned that CCA is the only shelter that houses whole families, that I know that that means that adult men can be there, right? Because
Yes.
most family shelters don't accept adult men or boys over a certain age or certain physical maturity. Do you want to just give a 1-minute overview of that? Because I don't think it's something that a lot of people really understand about our shelter system.
Well, the thing is when your family becomes homeless, the last thing you want to do is be separated, because all you have had is each other. No one's going to understand what you've been through more than your family. No child should ever be separated from their parents. No husband should ever be separated from his wife, and vice versa. So I understand that a lot of the shelters have their rules and the things that they require for their shelter, but we are strong about the family unit. We believe in the family unit because together as a unit, they are the ones that are going to help one another to get out of poverty. So we want to make sure that they both have access to the same exact services. We want to make sure that they understand that we care about the needs of the entire family as a unit. We want to know the mental health status of the children, mom, and dad. Is there any disabilities? What are your barriers? What can you all do together? Because at the end of the day, they have to rely on one another. They have to be there for one another. And the best way to do that is to keep them together so that they can see that they're better together, and so that they can be raised with that love and family unit and not ever feel abandoned. Because again, they're already going
Mhm.
through a rough
Right.
time and they're homeless. The
Right.
last thing you want to have to say is goodbye.
Right.
You have to go over to this program and to this building with these people who you don't know, and these strangers who have to make their own assumptions and come up with a plan that they think is best for you.
Right.
So that's already causing anxiety and stress that
Right.
they don't need. So together, they're together with the help of a full team of people, and they are there to uplift each other. So we believe it is highly important for families to not be separated and should be allowed to get help together.
Thank you. Thank you, Myra. I just felt like that was something that was important for people to understand, that often when you hear about family shelters, they are in fact shelters for women and small children, and and that they play a really, really important role, and help many, many people. But I just think that that's sort of a fine point that a lot of people who aren't who don't spend their days thinking about this kind of stuff really know. So Jill, nice to
Yes.
see you. Tell us about FISH and about the work that you've been doing.
Sure. So for those of you that don't know about Fish of Greater New Haven, we've been in existence and incorporated since 1968. We deliver groceries to people that are homebound, disabled, and are elderly. I started with Fish March of last year. My life changed a lot. I was furloughed from one job due to COVID, and I was just starting to collect unemployment when I got an email from one of the board members asking if I would be interested in becoming the interim executive director at Fish of Greater New Haven. And I said yes. Previously to being the executive director at Fish of Greater New Haven, I was working at Cornell Scott Hill Health Center. So I was working with a lot of people that were food insecure, that had a lot of health disparities. I worked in the community a lot, doing a lot of outreach. So I was very familiar with the New Haven community, very familiar with a lot of collaborating organizations and everything. So I felt like this was a perfect fit for me. As COVID started to come into New Haven, and as we started to shut down the state, Fish of Greater New Haven was in dire need of volunteers to be able to deliver the groceries. We were also in need of volunteers to do the grocery packing. What also happened at that time was Coordinated Food Assistance Network, which is made up of a great many organizations in New Haven. They wanted to do something for the community because they knew that a lot of the walk-in pantries were going to be closed, and people that were food insecure were not going to be able to get the food that they needed. So they started this program called Pantry to Pantry. And it was run out of Loaves and Fishes, and it was run out of Downtown Evening Soup Kitchen desk. So they started this program. They were able to get a grant, and they started this program. And lo and behold, 2, 3, 4 weeks into the program, they were delivering to 600, 700, 800 people a week that were either that had COVID, were told not to go out because of what was happening. So this was a great thing that they were started. They knew that they weren't going to be able to, they knew that this is not something that they were going to be able to do for the long term. So they were asking Fish of Greater New Haven to take it over because Fish of Greater New Haven already had a grocery delivery program. So part of my charge as interim director and then becoming the executive director was to take over the program and to open up a permanent site. Through private funding, Fish of Greater New Haven was able to take this over. In September of 2020, we moved into a new site at 269 Peck Street, and we were able to take over the Pantry to Pantry program. We took over that program, starting to deliver to 700 households a month. In combination with our grocery delivery program, right now, we are delivering to over 1,000 households a month, to people that are elderly, disabled. We're delivering to veterans. So, and we're also delivering to people that are still immunocompromised from COVID. Right. February, so we just had a ribbon cutting. We were able to move our grocery delivery program that was in West Haven over to our new location, and we're thriving and we're going strong. I don't see our numbers going down at all right now, because there still is a great need for the service that we provide to the community.
Right. Thank you, Jill. You guys do amazing work. There is a question from one of the attendees, Greg Melville, who asked, is there a citywide and or statewide organization that coordinates food recovery, like from restaurants, schools, or other sources? I wondered if you knew that, Jill.
Haven. It's called Haven's Harvest. They do food recovery in the greater New Haven area. I don't know if there's one in the greater Connecticut area.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, that's great. Perhaps we can put that in the chat so people can find that. So I had one other sort of question, and you both touched already on how your organizations have responded to COVID. And clearly what you're both saying is you've seen exponential growth in terms of need. And I will say from the diaper banking world, we see that as well. Our diaper banks across the country are seeing, 500, 600, 700% increase in the number of people asking for help. Aside from the numbers, are there other things that COVID really changed about the work you're doing? And I'll stick with you, Jill, and then go back to Myra, if that's okay.
Sure. So for us, we're trying to collaborate with the community in a lot of different ways.
Mhm.
So for instance, Fairhaven Community Health Center is offering free vaccines
Mhm.
to the Fairhaven community, and they're branching out, to the other neighborhoods. So in our grocery bags now that we're starting to deliver this week, we're actually putting the flyer in the bag.
Mhm.
So if there are any of our homebound, people that
Right.
are in need of a vaccine, Fairhaven will get them a ride. Fairhaven will actually go to their homes. So we're trying to branch out more, and give our clients more information on things that are going on in the community to be able to help.
Right.
Um,
No,
out-
that's great. And I think it's really interesting, right? Because the truth is that basic needs are a lot of what drives what people need. And
Mhm.
so they're able to get food from you, and therefore they're able to trust you to
Yes.
be able to help them to get the vaccine. And I think that's a really important point for people to recognize, that many basic needs providers are really trusted community members and trusted to help families. So Myra, how about CCA? Other, you described a lot about the need. Are there other changes that sort of took place during COVID that you think it's important for people to know about?
We are definitely structuring data more
Mhm.
because we want to know how many people we are serving more because of the uptick. So this way we can make sure the community and the donors and people understand the major need of this. We don't want this to just be our job. We
Mhm.
want to make sure that people are aware of the need. I forgot to mention, we have our grassroots advocacy group, Mothers and Others for Justice,
Right.
and we are involved heavily. We are on committees galore. We are at meetings. We are at the Capitol.
You
We
testify
are
all the time. I've
all
seen
the
you
time.
guys.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are very adamant on making sure that our voices are heard because we don't want any decisions made about us without us. We don't want anyone to make assumptions of what they think is happening in the communities. We want to make sure they know through testimony and
Mhm.
through the data so they can see that these issues, as Jill said, they are not going to slow down.
Right.
I don't see that happening at all because to me, it's just so far gone, especially with the economy and with jobs not being available as they were before. So we're basically doing the same thing. We're trying to be as resourceful as possible. So we are now even doing surveys because we want to know what other services people who are coming to our location need, because they may be coming in for just the food pantry, but they may need housing.
Right.
They may need mental health. They may need employment services. There's so many other things that they may need. Their focus may just be on the fact that I need food right now and I'm hungry. But what happens when your belly is full? Then you realize you have so many other issues that lie dormant, are not getting dealt with, and you don't know where to go. So we want to make sure that people know where to go to get those services. Even if we can't provide them, we still call them and say, we don't have this service, but here is some recommendations for other places you can go. Give 211 a call, or here's a program that we are aware of. So basically, we're becoming more knowledgeable about our surroundings and other programs that are now out here too, that have been out here, but maybe we weren't aware of. So that's basically one of the things that we're doing now. We're definitely making sure that we're bringing way more awareness and really, really want to know as a whole what people are in need of.
Right. And so what both of you really are saying is that you're seeing this almost as an opportunity to have a deeper relationship with the clients that you serve, which I think is a really important thing for people to recognize, that when they support basic needs organizations, they're supporting the whole family.
Yes.
So Myra, there are a couple questions here. How long can a family stay at CCA?
It depends on the circumstance. Lately, things have been moving smoothly because there has been a lot of people who have been writing grants and just basically giving, especially when it comes to housing. Prayerfully, it stays that way. So it depends on the family. We have families that are here sometimes for 3 months. Some families are here for 6 to 9 months. So
Right.
it really depends on the circumstance, because you have to remember, some people have major boundaries.
Right.
Some people have major barriers. I meant to say, not
Right.
boundaries, major barriers. So
Right.
first we've got to, get to the root of those barriers. We got to get those dealt with. And then we're able to advocate for them to receive the housing that is best fit for them. Because one thing we just discussed recently, we don't want clients who are desperate and just take anything.
Right.
We want to make sure they're taking something that they're going to be able to maintain and sustain.
Right.
So the time frame really depends on the circumstance of the family, but usually it can be anywhere from 3 months to 9 months.
Thanks. I think that that's a really important point that you just made, which is that you guys meet clients where they are. So
Yes.
yes, there are rules, there are parameters, but that those parameters don't always fit for every family.
Right.
Jill, there's another question about food insecurity and COVID. Do you think there are any groups that are going to conduct studies as to food deserts in relation to COVID? And how can the issue of food deserts in Greater New Haven be addressed? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
That's a really, really good question.
Yeah.
And it would be really good if a survey would be taken and some data would be done. I mean, in New Haven, there's always been food deserts. And, because of food deserts, there are so many people in New Haven that are food insecure.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it was a very specific question, and I think the
Yeah.
answer, right, is that it's a great thing that we should work towards. Myra, do you have anything to add to that, to answer to that question?
No, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, no, and I think that one of the things that comes up, and I think this is actually sort of an interesting thing to think about, right? There are lots of really, really important things to study. Organizations like yours are raising money to provide for people's most basic needs, and finding money to go beyond that and do these kinds of research projects. Those are, in my experience, those are big numbers, right? To do those kinds of research studies. And I think that grassroots organizations like yours that are doing such important work, I know, raise money and spend it immediately on
Yes.
on getting people food, housing, electricity, and things like that. So I think that's I appreciate that insight. What about hope? Do you feel like we're coming? You both sort of answered this, but we're people are starting to get vaccinated. Some people are starting to get vaccinated. What do you think? Are we moving out of this crisis, or do you think that this crisis really is going to continue on for people who are, struggling financially?
I think this crisis is going to be with us for quite some time. I think there's a lot of work that's still going to need to be done. There are a lot of things that are going to linger. I'm seeing that I want to make sure that I continue to have funding to be able to feed all of the people that we're feeding now, and to be able to give them healthy food too. I'm not just talking about shelf stable food. The food that we deliver, I want it to make a difference in people's lives, and I want them to be able to I want the families to be able to make meals with the food. You know, so we're trying to give them healthier options. You know, I'm also trying to think ahead, you know, not just to be a grocery delivery pantry, but perhaps to open for families that are working and don't meet our qualifications right now, but do something different. There's a lot of working families that still can't afford to buy food, that are going to be going back to work. And if you look at the traditional pantries, when they're open, they're not always open at night or on a Saturday or on a Sunday. So really try to think out of the box to be able to do different things to help more people, you know, that are still going to need what we do.
Right, right. Myra?
I just want people to understand, and I'm going to make this statement. For people who already couldn't afford to feed their families, their life has always been a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
To them, they feel like they've always been in pandemic mode.
Mhm.
And watching this pandemic be able to see so many people step up to the plate and do so much makes me wonder why we didn't do it before.
Myra, oh, sorry, go ahead.
We advocated so much and still do for food insecurity and for SNAP benefits to be increased, and kept being told it just wasn't in the budget and wasn't in the budget. And now they are giving it out to people who don't even receive it before the pandemic, meaning it was there already. The funding was there.
Mhm.
It took a crisis for them to say, okay, here you go. And now people are starting to have a false sense of recovery where they think they see the light at the end of the tunnel, not realizing we have the rent moratorium that's ending April 30th. We motel people, and we're already seeing people being evicted,
Mhm.
not being able to stay in their apartments because the landlords don't trust the tenants anymore because they haven't received money for so long.
Mm-hmm.
We have people who have their mental health is completely unstable.
Mhm.
So there's going to be a lot of residue because of this that for me is going to linger on for many, many years.
I really appreciate you saying that, Myra, and I think that that's absolutely true. And I would surmise that the reason that more people are responding to the calls that the three of us and so many others have been making for so long is because of the fact that so many US Americans who thought they would never have to experience poverty have finally experienced it. And I would go so far as to say, you know, when the pandemic first started, there was a run on toilet paper and diapers. And so as somebody who's focused exclusively on material basic necessities, what I said was, it's no surprise, right? Not having your basic needs met is incredibly stressful. And when we see people of means hoarding toilet paper, you know, it tells you that these basic needs that so many people don't think about are really important. And I think that's a really, really important thing for everyone to think about. Poverty is here. And, you know, like I said, when I was reading the introduction to the book, poverty can be like quicksand.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in it, it's so hard to get out of it. And everything brings you further down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's just no getting out of it. And I think that I hope, this is my hope, and I don't know if you guys share this hope, that so many people who have shown such generosity during COVID will remember that and continue that amazing generosity. Because I have seen, and I imagine you both at your organizations have seen an increase in
Yes.
donations during this
Yes.
time. Is that right?
Yep.
Yes, like I said, I'm in the food pantry, and someone's always knocking on the door with food and just
Mhm.
bags and bags of food. And they're always telling me, I'll see you next week. And I really do see them next week. And they've been faithful
Mhm.
every week for the past year. And again, we have not ran out of food. The pantry has not been bare at all. And I just really hope that this does not end when this pandemic ends, if it ever ends. I hope that people realize that there's always going to be people who are in need. And if you are fortunate enough to give, and if you don't know how to give, you find agencies like ours, and you give it to us, and we'll give it. Yeah,
Right.
I promise you that we will give it. It will get distributed to the people who need it.
Mhm.
So this,
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. And to me, that's the hope piece, right? Is that I hope that you know, that it will continue. Um, you know, one thing that I also was hoping you both would talk about is a little bit about um, how you get the food. There have been a number of questions. I know a lot of it comes from the Connecticut Food Bank, but I don't know, Jill, if you want to give just a little overview of how it is that Fish and other organizations like Fish actually procure the food that they distribute.
Sure. So we get most of our food from the Connecticut Food Bank.
Mhm.
Um, and so we get 2 deliveries a week. That's
Mhm.
about 16,000 pounds of food
Wow.
that we get. Yeah. And then we also get donations. So we'll get some donations from Havens Harvest.
Mhm.
Havens Harvest does a great job of going to other organizations and to stores to pick up food that they can't sell anymore. So
Right.
they'll bring food to us, and that could be from Big Y, it could be from
Mhm.
Trader Joe's, Chabasso Bread in New Haven, Bimbo
Right.
Bread in New Haven. They all do
Right.
a great job of donating food to us. So the
Mhm.
other thing that has happened too is we have gotten grants to be able to go and buy fresh food, fresh
Mhm.
fruits, fresh vegetables, milk and eggs. So that helps supplement, the food that we need as well. So I'm always looking for more sources, more distributors to get different kind of foods and to get more food for everyone. Now that the growing season and the gardening is starting as well, I'm in talks with some of the local farms,
Mhm.
about possibly, buying into some of the CSAs to be able to get fresh
Right.
fruit and vegetables or any leftover items that they might have
Right.
that we can
Right.
get. Yes, so
Thank you. Myra, is there anything different you want to add to that?
because a lot of the churches had to close their doors,
Mhm.
so a lot of them that were also food pantries in the community, what they did is they brought all of their stuff to us.
Oh.
So this way, they were still doing their part with the food
Mhm.
pantry. It may not have been at their location, but they're always saying, we've got some food that we won't be able to distribute, and they bring it to us. So I've
Mhm.
seen a lot of that happening. We just had a big donation today from one of the churches, and he comes
Right.
every week, so they're still doing their part with that. And again, we too are clients with the food bank. So
Mhm.
whenever we run out of things that weren't donated, we just place an order with them as well.
Mhm. Great, thank you. And there is a comment here from Joseph Edwards. Amen, amen. I am looking into seeing grocery store nutrition to add to recipes. The low-income families are struggling and will unfortunately continue to for a while. So thank you for that comment. Um, it's interesting when you listen to you guys talk about the food and how it comes in. Um, has the fact that schools are not open in person changed the distribution at all for you guys? Myra, do you want to go first and then Jill?
Yes, because of course now the meals that children would usually be getting at school they're now having to get at home.
Mhm.
So we always make sure when we prepare our bags that it's always for 3 meals for the family. So they've got a meal for breakfast, they've got a
Mhm.
meal for lunch, and they've got a meal for dinner. So
Right.
we are definitely making sure that they have enough to feed not just, the adults in the home, but we're taking into consideration that there are children. So we
Right.
do like to know the number of children in the home. So this way I know how to pack the bag. I know to add, extra items if there's like, little snacks and things for kids, because they're going to miss that. They're not able to have, the snacks and things that they had at school. So yes, that has changed things as well.
Thanks. Jill, anything to add to that?
Yeah, we're doing the same thing. If we know it's a bigger household that we're delivering to, we're giving more food to that household to make sure that everyone is getting fed, including the children.
Great, thanks. So there is a question, and I'm not sure if either of you are going to be able to answer this, but I'll read it to you and we'll see what we get. Since affordable housing is a problem in the city, how do you find landlords or real estate agency to connect or work with? Beulah Heights would like to build more affordable housing. What do you think the need is for 2 or 3 bedroom and studio or dorm style housing for ex-offenders and homeless people? Anybody?
Better jobs.
Better
Better
jobs.
jobs.
Yep.
That's it. The landlords need their rent and we want to pay them their rent. But, it's kind of hard when you're making $11, $12 and they already tell you that you need to be making a certain amount of money just to be able to afford a 1-bedroom. So the expectation is it's not meeting what people actually have. People don't have enough. So right now I just did a press conference with Senator Anwar, who is trying to bring legislation for a right to affordable housing for everyone. And my thing is the same way we have a right to breathe with no question, we should have a right to live and have housing with no question. It shouldn't be that you have to work 4 jobs just to pay for rent. Like, to me, that doesn't make sense when we know that the same way we need to breathe every day, we need to have a roof over our heads so that we can feed our families and be productive.
So
in
the
order
answer, sorry. So the answer to that question for you is yes, we need lots more 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms and studios that are affordable.
Yes.
And I think that your point, and actually it's funny because, I keep mentioning the book, but one of the theses of our book is there's a gap between how much money people make and how much it costs to live. And there are lots of ways to close that gap. It can be by raising the wage. It can be by universal basic income. There are all sorts of ways to get people money, but we've got to do one of them. I don't know,
Right.
Jill, do you have any thoughts on that question at all about the housing?
I don't. Myra did a great job.
Yes, she did. No, and I think that it's really, it's an interesting thing to think about, right? Why is it that so many things that we think of as rights, water, for example, right? Water is not free and lots of people don't have access to it. I want to give you each a moment to give some final thoughts, what you're hopeful about or what you sort of would like the group here to hear. So I will let Jill start and let Myra have the last word.
I guess what I would like to say is let us continue to lead the charge. If there's any way that you can help through funding, through donating, please do. There is just such a great need in the community, and I'll continue to do the work, and I know Myra will probably continue to do the work too. But just let us continue. This is not going to go away. Let's do our due diligence.
Right. Oh, thank you, Myra.
And my quote for the past year has been, in this time, you are either going to lead or you're going to need. And I thank God, because for the longest time, I was the one who was the one in need. I am a product of my community and what can happen when you invest in a person and you help them get the essential things that they need. We do eventually become productive members of society who give back. And I thank God, because at this point in my life, I am one of the people who are leading. I am making sure I give back what was given to me because I understand it, because I lived it and I still live it. So I am admonishing people, if you have it to give, give. If you're not sure how to give and where to go and you're not sure who to trust, you can always call 211 and they can give you a list of agencies and they can let you know what each of those agencies provide. You can also go to emails, to people's websites to see the services that they provide. There is always something that can be done, because together we won't survive this if we don't work together. Never be ashamed of your privilege. God blessed you to be in a position where you can go above and beyond. And to whom much is given, much is required. And for that, he will give back sevenfold. So please take this time, be a leader with us, and lead us all out of this pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I really appreciate your insight and your passion and all that you do to make New Haven a better place. I know that it's not easy to do this work day after day, but as you both said, it's incredibly important and none of us are going to stop. And I think that you're right about the need for people to recognize the importance of supporting basic needs organizations, that none of us would ever send our own children to bed hungry. And we should never allow anyone else's child to go to bed hungry either. And I think that it's a pretty low bar. And I think we can definitely jump over that bar together. And you have the websites. I know that the Community Foundation of Greater New Haven is going to share links to CCA and to FISH. And there was a question about where to get my book, and I put the link in the chat. Really, any place you buy books. Atticus, of course, is a wonderful place, or RJ Julia, or any place else you like. But thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. I know that both of our panelists would be happy to answer further questions. I'm sure that their emails will be shared. I am also happy to answer any further questions. And again, thanks to the Community Foundation for allowing the three of us to have this really great conversation.
Thank you, Joanne and Myra and Jill. It's been really helpful and enlightening to listen to and learn from your knowledge and experience. I would also remind folks that you can find a list on our website of all the organizations that have been supported through the COVID-19 fund. And I encourage you to consider supporting those organizations who are all doing really important work around basic needs and addressing the pandemic. We also have our givegreater.org website, which has a much more comprehensive list of organizations. And I would be remiss if I didn't remind you all that the Great Give is coming up in early May. And so you might want to start planning about how you're going to participate in the Great Give. And finally, I would remind you, as I mentioned earlier, we have a basic needs fund and an active group of donors who are working on raising awareness around basic needs. They have raised $3 million and want to raise $3 million more for these issues, many of which we've talked about today. And we also have our COVID-19 relief fund, which, as I mentioned, has about $350,000 left in it right now to spread across, excuse me, at least 2 more rounds of grant making. So lots of opportunities. Thank you all again for joining us. And please, if you have time, fill out the evaluation at the end of this webinar, and you will receive a follow-up email with a summary of what happened today and useful resources. So thank you all again and have a wonderful afternoon.